Boom. What up, folks? Dr. Dan, Ozark MMJ Cards in the house. How's it going? Thirsty Thursday, quite a warm one here in Northwest Arkansas. Listen, firstly, apologies if I ever have sound issues. I'm trying to figure out the equipment, and sometimes I don't always get audio. I drop the ball on it sometimes. I do apologize. It's still a work in progress, me figuring this thing out. I figured the medicine thing sort of out and figuring out the equipment, and this application is learning curve on its own. Anyway, nonetheless, listen, I'm grateful to be able to join you guys and just be able to raise my voice and make some awareness around all things cannabis, right? Really digging into the cannabis science, which I think is really fun because I don't think there's a ton of YouTube doctors really venturing into this foray, at least not in the way that I have. Not to be high on myself. I'm sure they're out there. Anyway, kudos, docs, if you are out there. Fun to join you. Great to be part of the camaraderie. So, really, what I wanted to dig into today, folks, was the idea of concentrates and my stance on that. All right. It does come up in conversation, especially amongst newer adult cannabis patients. Because they're curious about the different products. All these things have awkward names. The strains have weird names. So these things, getting in on the front end of it, a new cannabis patient, as an adult, it can present some challenges, especially with the lingo. For example, dabs, you know, dabbable syringe. That one always gets me because the word is spelled Dababble. So it's dab a bull, but how it's set up phonetically, it looks like dababble. So it is what it is. Anyway, so you have the dabs, and really folks who are tuning in out there, all of these things, these names that I'm going over here, these lingo names for these concentrates, which are concentrated oil products based off of the cannabis plant, the trichomes, which are the oil filled structures on the plant, the little dusty little white crystalline structures that house the cannabinoids. These things are melted down through a heating process and heated down real down, to the point where you get the most viscous distillate. So long story short, it's just melting down the trichomes, the active ingredients in the cannabis plant that give it its variety of effects. When you melt that down, you get the concentrate. Okay, so it's just a concentrated, very viscous, slick, oily looking substance that can vary in color from maybe green, light yellow to amber colored, all the way down to very dark brown, almost an off hue of black, but not quite. Okay, so these things can vary a lot in their color, their consistency. Some are milky translucent, and I think it'll go by the name butter with a D or whatever, Budder, or shatter, which is, I think the shatter is a more solid form of it that just looks like a shattered uh, glass type thing, amber colored glass type deal. So I could be wrong on the description of these a little bit, guys, but all of them are based on um the oil derivative of these crystalline structures, these trichomes that are housed on the cannabis bud. Okay, so they're also on the stalk of the plant, but pretty much they're housed on the flower for the most part. Excuse me, sorry for desk jump, folks. So what's the deal with these concentrates? Shatter, dabs, butter, what have you. I'm sure I could be leaving some out. These concentrates, they'll usually come in a little disc-like apparatus, a very small disc-like apparatus, maybe an inch in diameter. All right, circular, flat disc, maybe about a half inch high. Okay, so it'll usually come in a clear or amber colored glass container with a twist on top. So how these things are usually applied, maybe at some point I might edit in this video, maybe throw it in a corner somewhere, maybe a video of how these things are taken. So how this go. These are very concentrated forms, and I just wanted to weigh in and right off the top and say this stuff is not for beginners, right? This stuff is not for freshmen, strictly for live men and women and everything else. So everyone else, pardon me, respectfully. So back to the subject at hand. So right. So basically, folks, these are just concentrated versions, okay? And that's what I think presents the difficulty, because it's so concentrated. In order to hit that sweet spot and really get the true entourage effect, through which I think is achieved through judicious microdosing, that becomes difficult because these concentrated forms are so, they're fire. You know what I mean? They're really, really hype stuff. They do work, but my issue with them is that I believe them to work too well, and I believe their degree of psychoactivity is their limiting factor. Okay. They probably somehow can be dosed well, but you have to use an infinitesimally small sized pea-sized dose. And even if you're using this pea-sized dose, because it's so concentrated and viscous, it's a wax. Okay. All of these things are very thick, viscous waxes. They're not like tincture, which is like a more liquid, flowing fluid type oil, or might be dissolved in a liquid. Okay. So these things are thick, and they have to be picked up with a spoon or some sort of apparatus, a paddle or a slotted spoon, so that they can be lifted out of the container and then applied to some sort of dab rig, or some sort of structure that you have to heat. You have to use a very hot torch, a blue flame, not a Bic. Okay. All right. So this deal that you have to heat these suckers up with, the dab rig, a dab rig, okay, is a glass apparatus. Okay. It's a little piece that you pull out. Okay. So it's much like a bong, but what happens is you put your mouth over it and you create a vacuum suction, and you heat this thing before you apply the cannabis concentrate, right? Also known as a dab. Before you apply it to the glass container that you're going to ultimately heat it up in, and what'll happen, you'll melt this wax, it'll turn into vapor, you suck the vapor through the chamber. Okay. And then as it goes through the chamber, there'll be some water in the bottom to cool it. That it doesn't always happen that way, but I think that's how a dab rig works. I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to go back and check up on that just to be sure, guys. But what happens, you heat this stuff up, and then you suck it up through the dab rig, and you inhale the smoke. All right. But the fact that you have to use this blue flame, right? Hot like Hades, blue flame, and torch that chamber up before you apply a very small dose of that cannabis, that marijuana wax, that dab. You have to heat that thing up hot, 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 super, 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 super hot, right? That, number one, is dangerous if you're a freshman and if you go to remove that piece so you can unhook the vacuum and let air allow to let that negative pressure go and bring the smoke into your lungs. You have to remove that little part that you superheated. So you have to grab it by a little safe part and make sure to not burn your hands. So there's risk involved there. Starting with that idea, not only is it concentrated, the heat from possibly touching it, there's also the direct effect of the thermal injury of transferring that blue flame heat, which now the smoke is at that temperature. Maybe it might be cooled by some water in a bubbler down below, right? But don't count on it. That stuff is still going to get into you, likely super hot. Now, I know they work on a lot of things to cool this smoke down, so that idea has been touched on. So I do want to raise that one caveat. However, there is that idea of that thermal injury to very delicate lung tissue, that pulmonary tissue, where you'd otherwise be doing oxygen gas exchange, not cannabinoid exchange via superheated smoke. So I did want to raise really just awareness, from the medicinal standpoint, these concentrates can be a really tough juggle. Okay. So not for beginners, definitely not people jumping into it new to the foray. Personally, for me, I think these products are more appropriate for recreational use. That sort of thing. In certain patients, I think especially pain patients, excuse me, I think these products in certain cases can be appropriate, but you have to be very cognizant of the possibility of tolerance, developing tolerance due to such a high dose. What happens when you culture your endocannabinoid system to repeated high doses, these concentrates, they come in just really super high doses. I don't have the exact numbers, but I just offshoot, I just figure it would be orders of magnitude higher than, say, flour or other products. So because you're repeatedly exposing yourself to these super normal doses, your body is going to, as a defense mechanism, right, an evolutionary defense mechanism, your body will develop tolerance. And what tolerance means from a cellular and biochemical level is that the CB1 receptor, the THC receptor, which sits external to the cell surface, say my wrist here, right, is the cell surface. The external THC receptor, well, let's say this is a THC molecule, the CB1 receptor just catches the THC molecule, right? And then it transduces a signal down through the part that goes into the interior of the cell, ultimately directing cell function, protein translation, that sort of thing, DNA, transcribing protein, that sort of thing. So a series and a cascade of events that's initiated. So what happens with tolerance is that cell receptor, the CB1 receptor, simply would just turtle its head inside the cell. That's what's happening when it's being repeatedly bombarded with too many collisions of THC, right? It knows when it's being hit by the molecule but not docking. So if it gets hit too many times, it's aware that it's in a sea of too much THC. So it'll just say, you know what? Someone else would catch that bad boy. I don't need to be out here. There's too much out here anyway. So basically, they're just waiting for that concentration of THC to come down to an appropriate level where the cell can direct a proper homeostatic response. So this is all to just protect the cell from being overstimulated by too much of a cannabis response. So the tolerance is a good thing. All right. So that's the hint to take the tolerance break. What happens during the tolerance break? Well, the THC receptor, the CB1 receptor, just comes right back out. All right. So that's all that happens. So that's the whole point of that. And really, you can circumvent the tolerance break, folks, if you observe proper microdosing. I always end up falling back onto the microdosing thing because that's what medicinal cannabis really means. Okay. We always end up falling back on that. That's really what we preach here at my office, in my clinic at Ozark MMJ Cards. So, and the doctors that work with me, they're on board with the same thing. We're very consistent in our message. So cool. Just so y'all know, for those who are looking to get their cards, we operate in Arkansas, Missouri, and Oklahoma. So if people are looking to get their, I don't mind doing the sales plug in the middle of the educational talk. It's like 80-20. So cool. 80% educational. You got to do 20%. We've got to keep the lights on. So we're extremely competitively priced. So check us out, ozarkmmjcards.com. If you guys are looking to get legal access to good quality dispensary stuff, this is the way to go. We really know what we're doing, and we're super top notch in our service. We have a really good, awesome team. Morgan and Summer, they work with me. Jessica works with me. She sees all the patient applications. Dr. Steve, Dr. Larry, I have a really, really wonderful, awesome team of all-stars. We're all cannabis hustlers here in my organization. So that's what really makes being part of this neat. Plus, I get to make these little silly YouTube videos and talk cannabis science and whether or not to dab. So, folks, listen, dab if you want to dab. Enjoy yourself. Just be mindful. Do the things that really, really promote the best of your wellness. Be mindful of that thermal injury, folks. That's a real thing. Okay, so do whatever you can really to mitigate thermal injury, whether you're puffing it from the pipe, smoking a joint, whatever, doing a dab from the dab rig, just be real aware of that thermal injury to very delicate lung tissue. All right, that alveolar tissue, the little air sacs in our lung, they're very, very, they're very sensitive to thermal injury. You know what I mean? People get caught in a fire, inhaling smoke, all of that sort of stuff. The whole airway, including the nose, is susceptible to thermal injury because it's very delicate tissue that does air exchange and has blood supply. It's just very, very friable and delicate. Great. Anyway, listen, guys, nice talking. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It's always cool to have the opportunity to meet with you guys and talk everything weed. So don't forget to leave comments if you leave comments. And hopefully, if you guys want to hear more stuff, let me know. All right. Dr. Dan, over and out. Peace.